Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figure It Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be talking a little Atari gaming discussion, and I don't mean just the Atari Jaguar, though that'll be a big focus of it because that's what we have in front of us, but just kind of Atari in general. Yes, really, we're doing this. Before we do that, though, if you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before. Check out all my social media stuff in the description as well. We've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon. Appreciate the support on that especially. We've got Spreadshirt and my travel channel. Thank you so much for all the support. Although, again, the links are in the description. Thank you. But yes, that's what we're doing today. We're going to be talking a little bit of Atari. This is a gaming discussion video. To be clear, this is not a rumor video. I'm not telling you like Jaguar Mini inbound. I have no sources on that. It's nothing like that. This is just a discussion. You know, like I want to talk about the general state of Atari as a company right now and possibilities of things that might happen. That's all this is. Let's just have a nice fireside chat, as it were. So, let's first a little history lesson. Atari. Okay. Of course, one of the most famous video game companies of all time. They hit it big with the Atari 2600 in the 1970s. Ends up being one of the most successful systems ever. Then they run themselves into the ground. The 5200 was not a successful machine. It was also very broken, particularly the controllers. The 7800 was a cool machine, but far too little too late. Could not compete against the NES and the Sega Master System and just didn't work out. They kind of get into computers and stuff for a bit. They get into the handhelds. They, of course, had Lynx, which was a cool machine, but just didn't stand a chance against the Game Boy, culminating eventually into the Atari Jaguar, and eventually sort of, you know, the Jaguar CD barely making it out the door. And you can kind of make a case that the new one was technically their responsibility, but that's a different story entirely. Point is, that era of Atari, that company that did all that, ceased to exist in the mid-90s. And when they did, they sold off everything. One of the things they sold off, of course, was their name. And that, I believe, was eventually merged into Infogrames, which used to be a publisher and developer, who then changed their name to Atari, which is why you started seeing the name Atari pop up on a bunch of games all of a sudden on third-party consoles. I remember like those driver games for, you know, the PS2 and GameCube and so on and so forth, Xbox as well. Those Godzilla fighting games for the GameCube and Xbox, etc., all had Atari written on them. That was actually just Infogrames. Now, what eventually happens is we've reached a point now in 2023 where the name Atari, they've kind of really embraced their history. The fact they didn't just buy it as a name. They're like, okay, let's look at our own archives of things. And so over the past few years, we've of course seen things like these Atari collections that came out. Here's being an obvious one, the Atari 50th anniversary. But there were a few others, as well as you know, the Atari VCS system that came out not too long ago. And now we have this thing coming up called the Atari 2600 Plus, which is an Atari 2600. It plays cartridges and it has HDMI output. Okay. So, and Atari themselves is re-releasing games, and they're even making new games for the 2600. It's just kind of baffling to me. So the people in charge at Atari right now clearly are banking on the Atari 2600's nostalgia to sell stuff. And I'm like, that's obviously working for them to a certain degree. It just boggles my mind because I'm looking right here at this collection in front of me, the 50th anniversary one. It's 50. If somebody was 20 years old when Atari came onto the scene, they're now in their 70s. That's your target demographic? Are you sure about that one? But, okay, whatever. I'm just saying the majority of the people who will have nostalgia for Atari content from that era, and I'm actually one of them because my first system was a 2600. Granted, I got it in the early 90s, but, you know, my point is that's a big reach. You're just kind of asking a very old demographic to be into your stuff, and it's a strange business model to me. But then I look at Atari's history and I think, what choice do you have? Nobody really has nostalgia for the 5200 or the 7800. There's probably some for the Lynx and some for the Jaguar, but you know, it's mild. So I'm sitting here thinking, like, what else could they do? And to me, utilizing the Jaguar is kind of the most obvious route, because it's the most modern system they made, but also you could do more with it. So let me give you a little history lesson on the Jaguar here. in the mid-90s, when Atari's going out of business, like I said, they're selling everything, including their name. They also sold off a lot of molding rights. An interesting one, by the way, is they sold off one of their computers, and that shell was sold to Sony, who turned it into the PlayStation 2. I remember an old cleaning PS2 video I did. I made a joke about that because it just felt like the PS2's case was something Atari would have designed, where it was just kind of this big clamshell. I didn't realize that was actually true when I said it. It was just a joke. Turns out it actually is totally true. Anyway, they sold off the Atari Jaguar mold as well. Now, I did separate videos on this, but basically here's the history of that. Once they sell it off, they sell it to a guy named Steve who runs a company called Imogen. Now, I've actually met Steve multiple times. Imogen is a dental equipment, like camera sensory company that's in San Francisco, California. And Steve was very willing to talk to me because my buddy Jesse works there at Imogen. And he was like, yeah, you want to hear the story? Nobody ever asks about it. Let's go. So I did this like little mini doc on the whole situation years ago. But the Cliff Notes version is essentially that Steve needed a new camera rig to sell for dental equipment. And he heard about Atari going out of business and they had all these like mold assets, and he's like, it would be much cheaper to buy one of those than it would be to design my own. So he went over and looked around. He saw the Jaguar, not knowing really what it was, but it did look like the logical evolution of his own design. So he's like, oh yeah, let's get that. It kind of reminded him of a hot rod, so he called the unit the hot rod. And if you've ever looked online for white Atari Jaguar cases, those are Steve's. He made those by the thousands. You can get those easily. But the actual camera rig, the final units, he only made 4 of them. I've got one here. I'm not the owner of this. My buddy Jesse, who I just mentioned, is. So the thing with these was, Steve only made 4 of these. And the reason was, like, first let me explain what it even is. You ever been to the dentist and they have like a thing on the wall and it's got cables coming out and they scan your mouth with it? This is the thing on the wall. Now, those things on the wall, are expensive, extremely expensive. This was actually $20,000 as its initial price. Yeah, I'm not kidding. It's a different universe over there. I don't exist in the dental equipment universe, but that's the kind of stuff, that's the kind of numbers we're talking about for things like this. So Steve's idea was, since these are so expensive, wouldn't it be better to build a series of mounts throughout dentist offices, and you'd only have to sell them this thing once, hence this handle? And the idea was that you could take it and just kind of dock it in different units, and on the bottom there's a SCSI connection port. Kind of think about it like if you had a house with a bunch of rooms and you had a bunch of Nintendo Switch docks and you just had one Switch like system. The idea was basically that: take it around and connect it to different units, and then you don't have to buy the Switch once and buy docks, for much less money. That's the basic idea, but for dental equipment. So you'd plug it in, and then like the cable system comes off. Despite what it looks like, obviously, this is not a Jaguar. It is a camera. And if you're asking what the cartridge port does, it was for RAM expansions. Steve, when he bought this, straight up told me, he's like, yeah, I bought the CD units, I bought the systems, and I bought the cartridges. I did not buy the controllers because I didn't think we would need them. Then up here, there's a whole bunch of different additional buttons he added for different options, etc. Point is, this is what happened to the Jaguar after the Jaguar. But, as mentioned, only 4 of these were made in the final unit form, and the reason it never became more popular is because of the interface. He had selected SCSI, which was basically older tech for interfacing, and by the time this thing was out and ready to go, which was about 2004, the entire industry was using USB, so nobody really wanted this for that reason, and it wasn't worth a redesign, so he just moved on. The other 3 units are still in his possession. This is the only one currently not in his possession, but it belongs to my buddy Jesse, who also works there. But anyway, the point is, after that, he's just kind of sitting on the units, the molding rights for a few years, and he's approached by Mike Kennedy, who you guys might know, because he picked it up for the purposes of creating the Coleco Chameleon. Now, I'm no expert on that particular situation. I know a lot of people have done videos on it, but here's, again, the Cliff Notes version of what occurs, is that the Coleco Chameleon was basically promised to be this like independent video game system. Like, this is the one for the gamers. We're not going to be relying on big companies. It's just going to be us. And we're going to put it in the Jaguar shell just to remind us all this is a video game system. He had recruited a bunch of indie devs to start making games for this thing. And, there was an Indiegogo campaign and everything to try and get the system off the ground. And at some convention, I want to say it was like a toy fair in New York or something like that, he was, being told, like, you got to display what you have so far. So he had brought out basically a transparent, clear, like a Jaguar case, and it had a board inside, and everybody's like, oh, that's the unit, that's what it is. And it turns out the inside of it was just like some video card, like off the shelf, and he had just kind of squeezed it between the boards just to make it look like he had a working unit, even though it didn't do anything. This was quickly figured out, and the internet went nuts with it. Now, again, I'm no expert on that situation, but basically, I feel like Mike was a guy who was well-intentioned and completely overwhelmed and underestimated what he got into. And so he was just trying to, hey, I promise we're working on it, and he just approached it the wrong way. But that's my take on it. I could definitely be wrong. I don't know Mike personally at all. All I do know is that killed the whole thing, and he eventually just got out of it entirely. He then ends up selling the Jaguar molds to a guy named Albert. Albert is the guy who owns Atari Age. Now, Atari Age is a forum, a collection of Atari enthusiasts who not only celebrate the history of it, but also make new games, indie stuff, etc. And it was just, that's all it was. It was just this place for people to have fun with it. And Albert had picked up the rights just because he was a big Atari guy. Recently, like a month ago at the time I make this, Atari went ahead, the current version of Atari, went ahead and contacted Albert and bought Atari Age, which included the Jaguar molds. So in a weird way, they've actually made a full circle and come back home, which I think is kind of amusing. Now, you could look at that on the surface and say, oh, maybe they're planning a Jaguar Mini. I don't think they're doing that. I really think Atari was just kind of like, the current iteration of Atari is just trying to really capitalize on the 2600 nostalgia, like I said, and they're trying to find as much content as possible to really make unique and interesting and put out there. But technically, they did acquire those molds. So one must wonder, if they wanted to get creative about it, what would stop them from, say, releasing a smaller, condensed version of the Jaguar, you know, that particular casing, shape, and just putting, like, all this content on it? I guess I wanted to say is, I don't think a Jaguar Mini in of itself could be successful, because I sit there and I look at this game library and I'm like, it wasn't successful to begin with. There's not a lot of people that have really like significant nostalgia for it. And you look just at that library being so small, and even its most iconic games, things like Alien vs. Predator, you couldn't even do for licensing reasons. You'd have to talk to Disney about that one, as I'm pretty sure they would own that now. So I don't know if they would want to deal with it. However, if you did a Jaguar Mini and just kind of effectively did what they did here, just take like the content of this, put like content from all Atari stuff into just one device, then maybe you got something on your hands there. Maybe you got something kind of interesting that enough people would pick up that it might be worth your while, since you already picked up all the rights to this stuff anyway. Anyway, that's kind of my wild card idea for what they might do. But yeah, in general, I thought you guys might find that the history of that circular event of the Jaguar fascinating, and also just kind of a look at modern Atari and being like, huh, it's interesting. But I'll tell you right now, there's definitely something going on over there. Atari is a lot more active than it used to be. Like, I'm even getting approached by people connected to this, let's put it that way. And they're like, we have a whole bunch of products. Would you like to review them? And I'm just like, does everybody know what year it is? I mean, it's cool. I celebrate nostalgia and retro gaming, obviously. It's just kind of baffling that there's this much effort going into the Atari 2600 specifically right now. Cool, though. Anyway, that'll about do it. It's just a thought. I thought you guys might appreciate that. If you guys have any feedback or opinions on this, please let me know. Would you buy something like that? Like if they released a mini version of the Jaguar, but it also included, you know, there's some Jaguar, maybe there's some Jaguar CD, but there's also Link stuff and 7800, 2600, 5200, whatever it is. Would you be interested in something like that? I'm genuinely curious. Like, this is a nostalgic retro base, so you guys are kind of the target demographic. I am curious. So, yeah. Anyway, do me a favor, guys. Like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, and check out all my social media stuff in the description. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, etc. I appreciate that. Spreadshirt, and my travel channel. Appreciate the support. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.